This is Right to Life Radio with John Gerardi on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of the Right to Life of Central California. And now, here's your host, John Gerardi.
All right. Today on the show, we're going to talk about the brilliant musings of the great legal mind, Joseph Biden. And how they relate to abortion rights.
I'm so disappointed. I seriously thought you were going to say John Finnis right there, and I got all excited.
No, we kind of talked about that last week, and that's a difficult one for a popular radio show such as this one. This is Right to Life Radio. I am John Gerardi. This is Jonathan Keller joining me today, as always. And today we're going to talk about, first, a really bad piece of California legislation that is marching its way through committee. Which we had some of you, our supporters, try to call your state senator, Melissa Hurtado, who represents a lot of South Fresno, to urge her to vote no on this really bad piece of legislation, SB 245. So I want to describe what SB 245 does, and I have some comments that I've sort of developed and prepared over time for why this piece of legislation is wrong. And why this piece of legislation is a bad idea. I have my little opposition letter that I wrote. Here we go. So, Senate Bill 245. Let us describe what this bill does. All right. So, first, to give the context, California forces insurance providers to cover abortion in lots and lots and lots of ways. And California funds abortion through insurance plans in all kinds of ways.
I should point out, California illegally
does this.
Health insurance companies to do this.
So a couple of ways to understand ways in which California furnishes abortion provision that is beyond the norm of what you see in other states. First, as Jonathan tries to break the microphone. First, California has always funded abortion through our state's Medicaid program called Medi-Cal. We have always funded abortion through Medi-Cal, and we have never been allowed not to defund it through Medi-Cal. Basically, abortion became legal. Abortion came to be covered under our state Medicaid plan because it was deemed a healthcare practice. Our state legislature tried to basically institute a state version of the federal Hyde Amendment. Now, the Hyde Amendment, those of you may know, this is this rider that gets attached to the federal budget and major federal spending plan bills every year. And it basically says that no federal dollars can directly pay for abortion through federal health insurance plans, and that's chiefly through Medicaid. California wanted to pass something similar, basically to cut off any California state dollars from directly paying for abortion. The California state legislature in the 70s tried to do this, and the ACLU kept suing and got the California State Supreme Court full of left-wing activists picked by Jerry Brown during his first go-around. They got the California State Supreme Court to say that no. California can't tip the scales by funding pregnancy and giving pregnancy coverage, but not funding abortion coverage through the state Medi-Cal plan. Therefore, it's illegal. It's illegal for California. Under our California Constitution, it is unconstitutional for California not to fund abortion through the Medi-Cal program. And that was the idea the state legislature, the state Supreme Court cooked up, was that basically we're preserving choice, so we can't fund one choice without funding another. Insert here the laundry list of other choices that the state funds or does not fund. Anyway, so we've set the standard, though, Jonathan.
Mm-hmm.
We in California are into funding all choices and funding all choices equally and equitably.
Can I ask a question, John? Because this actually sounds like, as poor and convoluted as that legal reasoning is,
it is indeed both poor and convoluted.
If that is the controlling legal precedent in the state of California,
indeed
thanks to our the archons of Sacramento or the Supreme Court, I should say, of California, wherever they're based, wouldn't that actually maybe make this bill itself actually unconstitutional?
Yes. Well, let's talk about this bill. All right. Fast forward to now. I think first though we have to go to 2014.
Yes.
Okay.
The infamous Department of Managed Healthcare decision.
In January of 2014, California Department of Managed Healthcare got some complaints from Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood was complaining that certain large Catholic employers, chiefly Loyola Marymount University and Santa Clara University, Planned Parenthood was upset that those universities did not include abortion coverage as part of their employer-based insurance plan. Not a crazy thing. Santa Clara University and Santa Clara University and Loyola Marymount are Catholic colleges, albeit Jesuit colleges, but still Catholic colleges, and Catholic colleges don't want to provide abortion coverage. Fair enough. But Planned Parenthood doesn't seem to understand that if you're a Catholic school, you're not supposed to pay for abortion. So they complained to the California Department of Managed Healthcare. And the California Department of Managed Healthcare then proceeds in summer of that year, I believe it was August of 2014. They didn't issue a new regulation explicitly through the normal regulatory process. They just sent a letter.
Dear colleague.
They sent a series of letters to some of the chief private insurance companies in the state of California, all the main private insurance companies in California, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Kaiser, etc. And they said, as part of California law, you insurance providers have to cover all essential healthcare services. Well, we are defining that abortion is essential healthcare. There's no such thing as elective abortion, actually. So really, all abortions are necessary healthcare, essential healthcare. We eliminate the entire category of elective abortion as even being a thing that exists. Ergo, you have to cover it in all of your insurance plans. You are not allowed to have an insurance plan that does not. You are not allowed to have any of the exceptions that you have maintained for large Catholic employers like Loyola Marymount, like Santa Clara University, like various Roman Catholic dioceses, like churches, etc.
John, I just have to point out here for the listeners/viewers, it's important to understand how devious this is, because instead of Planned Parenthood or even public healthcare bureaucrats going to the legislature and saying, hey, we think we need to pass a new law. Mm-hmm. We think that there needs to be legislation that is drafted and reviewed and debated and given an opportunity for public comment and then voted on and then signed by the governor. Right. The normal process by which you would make sweeping changes in public policy.
And I'll bet you, now it's a bet, I don't know 100%, I bet Jerry Brown would have vetoed that.
I think you might actually be right.
Because there were some really bad pro-choice things that Jerry Brown actually vetoed in his last 2 years as governor, which shocked both of us.
Yes. So much so that... Yeah. It was, I can't remember if it was Planned Parenthood or if it was NARAL Pro-Choice California, took out a full-page ad in, I think, the Sacramento Bee or something, denouncing Jerry Brown for stabbing women in the back.
Yeah, but Jerry, ironic given what abortion does to actual women, literally. But Jerry Brown at that point was in his second of his 2 terms. He was not running for re-election, and I think he just didn't care.
His honey badger face.
Yeah, he just did not give a bleep. Anyway, I'm explaining this just to give the broader context in which this new bill, Senate Bill 245, comes in. All right, let's actually get to the point.
Yes.
Senate Bill 245. What does Senate Bill 245 do? What Senate Bill 245 does, which has been introduced into the state legislature this year, it basically eliminates all copays and deductibles, all out-of-pocket costs for abortion for anyone with insurance in the state of California. All right? So that includes Medi-Cal recipients. They get all of that waived. Now, for a lot of Medi-Cal recipients, they already had a lot of that waived, but that gets totally waived. All of those costs. So that is a cost, presumably, that's just going to be borne now by the taxpayers of California. But even for people with private insurance plans, they don't have any out-of-pocket costs anymore for abortion, which presumably that cost is just going to be shifted in the form of higher premiums, which businesses, employers will pay.
And John, I have to point out, I was actually at the hearing on Wednesday. Mm-hmm. I was there with Greg Burt, our staff member from California Family Council, and we were talking about this. And the way that they were talking about it was they weren't saying that, we're paying for it. They said, women who are in this procedure currently, they have to participate in cost-sharing arrangements.
i.e. pay for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, and Senator Richard Pan. I'm sorry. I mean, all due respect,
Sorry.
I know you're the chairman of the committee, but
Yeah. Anyway.
the apology that he was giving for, well, there can be times where cost sharing is appropriate with certain medical procedures, but not with abortion. I mean, come on, what are we here, savages?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, you are savage. You're killing innocent children. So now we tried to get some people to make calls to our local state senator, Melissa Hurtado. Unfortunately, she did vote in favor of the bill. I don't think that was ever much of a question, unfortunately. And it's really unfortunate because I want to highlight this, and we'll dig into this maybe a little bit more. I said at the start of this segment, the California State Supreme Court, the reason why they deemed unconstitutional the various attempts by the California legislature to cut off federal funding, to cut off California state dollars through the Medi-Cal program for abortion. They basically said, well, the state can't be giving more support for one choice over another. And once we've started funding abortion, we can't just take that away. We're not equitably supporting these two choices.
People have
having children and not.
People have made their intimate decisions for their lives for the last certain number of years, predicated on. Sorry, I'm channeling Anthony Kennedy again.
Well, let's go through. I think we're now at the point at which our state is furnishing way more support for abortion than they even are for childbirth. Okay? As someone who has had several children while on a private insurance plan, I can tell you there are out-of-pocket costs. Okay? There are deductibles.
Just a bit.
There are copays. And you got to pay them.
As someone who is on not corporate insurance, but even on a health sharing plan.
Yeah.
Yes. When we wrote the check for $2,500 out of payment, out of pocket, there you go.
Yeah. And so it's at a point where now to actually have a baby is basically the state of California is furnishing your ability to abort your child way more than they are furnishing your ability to have a baby. Now, I understand having a baby is more expensive than having an abortion.
On multiple levels.
On multiple levels. Okay, even just the medical costs of delivery as opposed to the medical cost of abortion. But it is our liberal friends from the California State Supreme Court who sort of set up this line of argumentation that we can't be supporting one choice over and against another.
It's also our liberal friends that make the point, John, you just care about the babies until they're born, and after that, you don't care. Well, apparently, at least according to this bill, they care about paying for the babies as long as you can kill them, but not if you're going to give them birth.
Right, exactly. So this bill is so bad on so many levels, but I think this is kind of the chief way, the chief way in which it's bad is that more children are going to be murdered. That's the chief way. But beyond that, there's this obvious hypocrisy that the left has. There are even some kind of like very self-reflective pro-life people who said, we really shouldn't call them pro-abortion because that's not what they are. They're pro letting people have a legal choice. And I've never really agreed with that line of thought. Well, they're not pro-choice. There are all kinds of choices in life. Like why is this choice between killing and not killing a baby? Why is this the only one that gets labeled with the euphemism choice? It's a euphemism. Really what they're in favor of is legal abortion. So I think it's perfectly fine to call them pro-abortion, just like we call pro-legalized marijuana people pro-marijuana people, or pro-legalized assisted suicide people pro-assisted suicide. They're not all just pro-choice for marijuana or assisted suicide, whatever. And it's policies like this where it seems they're far more enthusiastic for helping pay for abortion than they are for paying for childbirth that make me think, no, these people, they don't want abortion to be rare anymore. They want abortion to be universally accessible. They like the fact that these people are choosing abortion. We'll have more on this right after the break. This is Right to Life Radio, a production of Right to Life of Central California, rtlcc.org. Bruce Springsteen with us today on Right to Life Radio.
John, I'm sorry. You've kind of ruined this song for me because I can't help but think of the cheesy Courtney Cox dancing every time I hear it now.
Well, yeah, sorry. This song was ruined for me because of this horrible podcast that Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen are apparently doing, which is just like, I don't know, it's just liberals.
Just most pretentious thing ever.
It's just like, if you could take, it's just a big pat yourself on the back session from wealthy liberals patting themselves on the back. So anyway.
But don't worry, I hear they're going to have a guest of Chris Christie, so that should be...
Chris Christie's going to be on?
No, I'm just kidding.
Gee, yeah. There's no way they would do that.
It's fair.
As much as Chris Christie probably loves Bruce Springsteen, because anyone from New Jersey legally has to love Bruce Springsteen. Yeah, there's no way that that's going to happen. Right to Life Radio, John Gerardi and Jonathan Keller. We're talking about Senate Bill 245, and this bill is unfortunately marching its way through the state legislature, and I think the difficulty with this bill, Jonathan, is that, look, the only way we're able to stop really bad pro-choice legislation is if we are able to raise neutral arguments against abortion. And what Senate Bill 245 does, as we explained, it eliminates all copays and deductibles for abortion for anyone who has insurance in California. And let's note again that, this is furnishing like 100% financial support for anyone who wants an abortion, as opposed to childbirth, where we are not furnishing such support.
And John, we're talking about one of the people who testified, a young lady who, I mean, my heart broke as I was listening to her, because she was talking about, she found out last year that she was pregnant, and she said, this is, I was not ready to be a parent. I was, devastated. I was scared and nervous, and I knew I, quote, had to have an abortion. So yes, shame on our society, shame on our culture in general for making any woman feel like she has to have an abortion. I want to get that out of the way up front.
Right.
But then she mentioned the fact that, I had to I went there, I made my appointment at the abortion clinic, and I got there and I found out it was going to cost me a whole $600 out of pocket. Mm-hmm. And, it was devastating. I didn't know how I was going to do this and make my rent payments. And I'm thinking to myself, so we're really talking about the fact that it is too expensive and too inconvenient to kill your child. Not the moral weight and gravity and travesty of any child being killed, but dear legislature, it was too expensive.
Yeah.
Can you make it easier next time?
Well, and that's all that the legislature has been doing when it comes to abortion is accessibility. Accessibility is the key buzzword. And if there is any barrier to someone being able to have an abortion, they will knock it down. They will knock down whether that barrier is cost, have someone else pay for it. So if you're on insurance, okay, well, you don't have to pay the copay or the deductible. Well, someone has to pay it. It's not like Planned Parenthood's going to get is going to accept less money.
I mean, John, it was just so calloused, because I'm sitting here and you have these legislators, these progressive legislators. Anthony Weiner was on the committee, Susan Eggman. I mean, it's this parade of horribles on this health committee.
A who's who of just pro-choice zombies.
Yeah, and I'm thinking here, okay, you guys are supposedly, at least according to your protestations, you're the party that cares about women, you care about children, you care about health care. We conservative pro-life people, we're supposedly the barbaric, indifferent party. And yet you hear this young lady who obviously, and she said, after I had the abortion, I wept. I went back to my car and I sobbed. And she didn't say she sobbed because she had the abortion, but because of the financial impact.
Ramifications?
Yes. So I'm thinking here, number one.
Well, she says because I mean,
yeah. But I'm thinking, no one on that committee said, maybe we should do something about the financial devastation that people feel that they're not able to do this. I'm not
like parenting program.
Yeah.
And this is, I mean, honestly, this is almost, and maybe we'll dive into this in the next segment. I think this ties in to the posture that the Republican Party has taken. You know what? Actually, let's just head into a break because I want a full segment to do this. The posture that the Republican Party in California has taken vis-a-vis social welfare programs and social conservatism, and the long-term impacts of that we are not the party that we. The Republican Party is basically not viewed by the majority of Californians as the party of compassion, and that has to do with certain decisions that the party made about 20 or 30 years ago. I want to dig into that, the huge strategic mistakes that the California Republican Party took as far as supporting or not supporting a pro-life stance. That's next on Right to Life Radio. Girls just want to have fun here on Right to Life Radio. And by girls, I don't actually mean girls and Jonathan Keller and I.
That's us.
All right. So I want to take a big, full, one of our bigger segments here to talk about an idea that's been on my mind. And Jonathan, I will get your feedback on this because I'm suspecting you agree, but I understand it's easier to be on the sideline saying things rather than, in the thick of it. And I recognize these choices were made when I was -5 years old. So I want to show our audience. I'll see if I can. For those of you watching on the YouTube feed, I have here, this is a chart. Okay. It is
is this your famous four-quadrant chart?
This is the four-quadrant chart.
Ah.
Okay, now, those of you listening on the radio can't see this, but this is an XY graph. And
if you are listening, you can go to your Twitter feed, I believe. You got pinned at the top of your Twitter feed.
Yes. Go to @FresnoJohnny, and this tweet is sort of pinned at the top. All right. So along the up-down x-axis, the y-axis is economic conservatism. The XY axis is social conservatism at the top, social liberalism at the bottom. And along the XY axis, you have fiscal liberalism on the right and fiscal conservatism on the left, social conservatism on the right. So basically, it's four quadrants with the combinations of fiscally conservative and socially conservative on the top right, fiscally liberal and socially liberal on the bottom left. And then you have fiscally conservative but socially liberal on the bottom right, fiscally liberal but socially conservative on the top left. All right. Now, that's going to be hard to keep in mind, but just remember.
Just go to the Twitter page.
Just go to the Twitter page.
It'll make sense.
You can look at it or watch this on YouTube. All right. So, Republicans in California have been the minority for a very long time. Okay? Very, very long time, Republicans have been in the minority. And when you're in the minority in a given state, what do? You try to appeal
elect movie stars.
Well, you try to that's the real thing to do. Elect movie stars who believe in all of the principles of the opposing party. What you have to do, or what you're inclined to do anyway, is compromise on something. Compromise on some of the platform positions of your party in order to make yourself more attractive to those on the other side.
Okay? Maybe we should re-examine where the electorate is going, and we should
move in that direction. Exactly. Yeah.
Expand the tent.
A big tent.
Broaden the party.
Broaden the tent. So the California Republican Party in the 80s came up with this brilliant strategy. What if we became we stayed fiscally conservative, don't dare budge on the SALT deduction. don't dare budge on Prop 13. Don't dare budge on taxes, on all these social welfare programs. Say the Orange County millionaires who kind of controlled the Republican Party at that time. But let's compromise on all that social issue garbage.
Who's pro-life anyway?
Abortion, that's just an anchor around our neck. No. We'll get rid of the social aspect. So we'll start having a party of fiscal conservatives and social liberals. I still remember someone ran for senator. Some dude ran for senator, and his advertising was, he's a fiscal conservative. No apologies. It's like, okay, yeah, so you're the easiest thing to be in California Republican politics.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one needs you to apologize. All right.
And John, lest people think, oh, come on, where's the evidence that this is the defining characteristic of the California Republican Party? Well, we have had, out of the last 30 years, we had 8 years of Pete Wilson as the Republican governor in California.
Fiscal conservative, social liberal.
We had 7 years of Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Republican governor of California.
Sort of fiscal conservative, social liberal.
Yeah. So
Ronald Reagan, who signed our first abortion legalization law.
I mean, I know it's true at the time. Yeah. Now, George Duke Majan, I think he at least was... who was the governor in the 80s.
But he was way back in the day.
But of the last 30 years, the thing that will blow people's minds, we had Republican governors for basically 15 of the last 30 years. Mm-hmm. And both of those were in that quadrant that you're talking about.
Yeah, fiscal, conservative, social liberals. Now, what you will see in this graph, as I'm showing it again, is that we have the fiscal, conservative, social liberal quadrant sort of outlined with black marker. And all the dots on there are all of the people who voted in the 2016 election and how they self-identify on this graph. Notice that the fiscal conservative social liberal quadrant has the fewest votes in it. Fewer people identify as fiscal conservatives and social liberals than in any of those four options. All right, fiscal liberal, fiscal conservative, social liberal, social conservative. The combination of fiscal conservative but social liberal is the least popular option in all of American politics. And that was the option that the California Republican Party chose. Now, allow me to show the next graph. In the next portion of this graph, there's a big segment of blue Democrat voters in the quadrant of socially conservative but fiscally liberal.
A lot of these, John, I would say, from statistics we've seen, many of these people also happen to be voters of color.
They happen to be Latin American and African American voters.
Yeah.
What do we have a lot of in California? Latin American voters, many of whom are Catholic, many of whom are fairly recent, i.e. within the last generation or two, immigrants, many of whom brought with them to California their Catholic faith, some of whom converted to become Baptists or other kind of Protestants, many of whom are pro-life. I know of Latin American, very devout pro-life Catholic voters who were shocked to learn in 2009, at which point it was too late, that Barack Obama was pro-choice. Barack Obama's pro-choice?
But he's a Democrat.
But he's a Democrat, so he's for immigrants and for the poor. Well, yeah, but he's pro-choice. What? No, he's not.
And John, similarly,
yes, he is.
We've seen a lot of our friends, again, in that same demographic in the last several months. Wait a minute, but I thought Joe Biden said that
I thought Joe Biden was moderate.
Yeah, he supported the Hyde Amendment until he flip-flopped famously in 2020. Yeah,
but 2019, yeah.
I mean,
after 40 plus years of supporting the Hyde Amendment.
But I was reasonably assured that he was going to stand up to the worst excesses of the party. Isn't that why he was picked by? And the really tragic thing is, John, just side note, the only reason that Joe Biden won the nomination to be the candidate for the Democrat Party is because socially conservative and fiscally liberal Democrats
voted for him
in South Carolina. Mm-hmm. His campaign was a zombie campaign. Yes. He was a dead man walking.
Dead in the water.
And James Clyburn, the very influential House minority or majority whip, and
now majority.
Now majority whip, and the most well-known politician in the state of South Carolina, long tenured African American politician. He endorsed Joe Biden right before the South Carolina primaries.
Right.
And
that's why Joe Biden is president today.
If that had not happened, if African American Protestant voters who had voted pro-life, or I'm sorry, voted Democrat for most of their entire life, if they had not voted for Joe Biden in South Carolina, if they would have instead voted for anybody else, or if they would have stayed home because they didn't have a candidate in the race, Joe Biden would not have won.
Yeah.
You would have had either, Bernie Sanders,
Maybe
or
Bernie.
you would have had Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah.
I mean,
who knows? Yeah. So here's the point I'm trying to make. The California Republican Party decades ago made this strategic decision. We're going to hold a hard line against social welfare programs, against, we're going to take a tougher stance on immigration. We're going to do all these things. And look, I don't care. For the purposes of this argument, Right to Life doesn't take a position on immigration questions. Right to Life doesn't necessarily take a position on social welfare programs, et cetera. Okay, you believe what you want on the merits of those things. I'm just talking as a matter of political strategy. If there was something for us to have compromised on, if there was something for the Republican Party to have compromised on, given that over the last 30 years, how many new Latin Americans have become voters in this state? How much of a larger share of the vote do Latin American and other minority voters have in this state now than they did 30 years ago? The Republican decision makers of 30 years ago made the 180 degrees wrong decision. They thought that everyone thinks like an Orange County Republican millionaire. That, we got to just make sure the corporate gains tax, the capital gains tax rate's got to stay low. That's what the immigrants really care about. We got to make sure that, a family, the WIC program. What? Absolutely not. No.
and the thing that's, John,
they were so blind to what voters actually want because what they cared about, because these people were, look, I think anyone joins a political party or gets involved in politics because there's a signature thing you care about, and then you maybe kind of care about the other things. For a lot of conservatives, frankly, I think a lot of conservatives become Republicans because they're pro-life.
Yep.
And they're like, all right, I'll take on all these other things.
But I'll say, John, as an example, if you are a pro-life family that has you have 6 kids, you live in Fresno, California, you are a single income family.
Sure.
You're white and you're of moderate means, but you don't make a ton of money. You don't have lots of investments in the stock market.
Feels like you're describing me like 3 years from now.
Well, anyway. It could be anybody.
Anyway,
but if you are newly involved in politics, you're newly involved in social issues, you probably aspirationally are like, eventually I'd like to keep more of my money and everything else like that.
Sure.
But it's not the animating driving force of your life.
No.
You probably actually have more in common with your across the street neighbors that also have 6 kids that happen to be Catholic, but are Hispanic
and are and vote Democrat because that's consistently been the party the Democrats have supported.
But other than voting, other than
you're probably very similar.
Other than your ethnicity and your voting, you might even work at the same job,
right?
And the only reason why I think a lot of middle income white evangelicals have been Republicans has been largely because of conservative social issues, marriage, family, religious liberty.
And so here's the position,
pro-life.
Yeah, and so here's the position that Latin American voters have been put in. Lots of Latin American voters prefer liberal social welfare programs, liberal fiscal policies. Okay, so now they have 2 options, let's say, in voting for governor. Do I vote for a pro-choice person who doesn't align with my Catholic faith, who is a huge fiscal conservative, who I don't agree with on all these fiscal issues? Or do I vote for a Democrat who I also don't agree with him on abortion, but he aligns with all my fiscal beliefs and wants more generous welfare policies and wants more generous immigration policies. Whom am I going to vote for? Of course you're going to vote for the Democrat. And basically what the Republican Party did was they tried to align themselves with the least popular quadrant of all American politics. The quadrant of American politics that it turned out has the fewest voters possible. And now, guess what? It's almost too late. Now, unless you want to try to take the Titanic and turn it around 180 degrees, I mean, how are you going to now convince two generations of Latino voters who think that Republicans want to deport them all? How are you going to convince them to start voting for conservative social policies? And especially after our law in California, law influences how people think. Law influences how people believe. And the beliefs, as you get younger and younger, and this is true, I think, with Latin American voters, with any voters, white voters, whatever, is that people are becoming more and more and more accepting of abortion as it just becomes more and more a part of the fabric of American and California life.
And as we saw probably likely going to happen, you won't even need to go to a clinic to do it.
Yeah, well, and as abortion education is taught in the schools, we made this horrible strategic decision to go after the least popular quadrant of American life because millionaires from Orange County thought that everyone else in the state thinks like they do. And if there was anything we should have compromised on, it should have been fiscal policy, not abortion. So, anyway, that's my rant about why, and I think it's the reason why, as of right now, the Republican Party in California has 1/4 of all the seats in the state legislature and are basically totally insignificant and dead. When we return, we'll talk more about this on Right to Life Radio, right here on Power Talk. All right, the B-52s. We're playing a really stupid song to introduce a really stupid line of reasoning from Joe Biden. You've heard of this guy, Jonathan?
Once or twice.
Joe Biden?
Regrettably.
President of the United States. He's actually
the number
lawyer.
one in the Biden-Harris administration.
Yeah, in the Harris-Biden administration.
Harris-Biden administration.
Yeah. Anyway, so
he's on the ticket.
Joe Biden was a United States senator for 30-something years, was vice president for 8 years. He is now president of the United States. His knowledge of constitutional law seems a little sparse for someone with that kind of a pedigree. He was a proud graduate of Syracuse Law School, and he did barely graduate. He's sort of now.
Just as a side note, because you laughed. If you go on YouTube and you Google, Joe Biden, resume or Joe Biden, accomplishments, there's this hilarious compilation that someone did from his 1987-88 presidential run, where he is berating a reporter. I bet I have a higher IQ than you. I'd be happy to sit down and go toe to toe with you anytime. And he's like,
yeah.
I graduated first in my class and 3 degrees.
Did not.
And then it cuts to a fact check of that by either Sam Donaldson or Tom Brokaw. Biden did in fact not graduate first in his class. He graduated near the bottom and with 1 degree and not on an academic. I'm like,
yeah. So anyway, Joe Biden. Now this is a discussion about Joe Biden was talking about the Second Amendment because he's introduced a bunch of gun control executive orders, which again, we're not taking positions one way or another on that. But it was his comments on the Constitution that I found interesting. So here's what he had to say. Nothing I'm about to recommend in any way impinges on the Second Amendment, Biden said. They're phony arguments suggesting that these are Second Amendment rights and what we're talking about. Biden added that no amendment to the Constitution is absolute.
Except abortion. Wait, that's not an amendment.
Thanks for undercutting the whole point of this segment, Jonathan. Sorry. All right.
You can tell we do a lot of show prep on here.
Yeah. Biden added that no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. You can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater and call it freedom of speech. From the very beginning, you couldn't own any weapons you wanted to own. From the very beginning of the Second Amendment existed, certain people weren't allowed to have weapons. Yeah, certain people like slaves. All right, anyway.
Yep.
So, first what he says is no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. There are already tens of thousands of laws governing individual gun ownership in the United States. This is a National Review piece. But let me just note. So this is the point, which Jonathan kind of spoiled earlier.
Sorry.
That's all right. No amendment to the Constitution is absolute. Now, Biden is kind of correct, sort of, in saying that the conditions by which a state action can infringe on a protected fundamental First Amendment right, there are situations when they can, but they are very difficult conditions to meet. And we have a sliding scale of standards for when the government can infringe on certain kinds of rights. Okay, so the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, for example, that applies much according to our 14th Amendment jurisprudence. Basically, the government has more ability to discriminate on the basis of sex than they do on the basis of race. Okay, the standard for when the government can discriminate on the basis of race is such that it can basically never discriminate on the basis of race. But it is more able to discriminate on the basis of sex. The standard is slightly lower. This is why only men were eligible for the draft. This is why military standards between male and female soldiers were different. This is why there are certain bona fide differences between men and women, biological differences that our law has recognized. And it's so funny that he thinks no amendment to the Constitution is absolute, except for one thing that isn't an amendment to the Constitution. It's not in the Constitution. It's nowhere to be found in the Constitution. And that's the right to have an abortion. Which, if Joe Biden had his way, there would be no ability for anyone, whether it's Congress, whether it's a state legislature, to regulate abortion at any point during the 9 months of pregnancy. In fact, he is a member of a political party completely committed to that premise, that the right to abortion, a right that is not actually in the text of the Constitution, not actually written in there, is in fact absolute. His own HHS secretary, when asked, hey, what is an abortion restriction you would support?
Abba-dabba-dabba-dabba-dabba-dabba.
Could not identify one. Javier Becerra. So it's very funny how Joe Biden is all about, and very reason. By the way, I don't disagree with him. Most constitutional protections, provisions have they're not absolute. I agree that even the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms isn't absolute. No one's ever been allowed to own small nuclear warheads and have them sitting in their backyard. As Jerry Vale sings us out. But it is definitely true that the left has a totally outsized notion of the right to abortion, and it's not even in the Constitution. That'll do it for us. We'll see you next week on Right to Life Radio.